Okay, so
this woman
it took
dies.
a lot more than that, though, in order to turn this Clearwater investigation, because they had a dead body on their hands, and you don't just get to turn the other cheek when you got a dead body on your hands. So it took massive amounts of money on the church's part to engage in public relations campaigns, events. They would bring Clearwater luminaries together, government officials and stuff, and they would wine and dine them. And they really went all out for about two and a half years, fighting this investigation, keeping David Miscavige's good name anywhere, totally away from it. Plausible deniability, 1,000%. Destroying records, like I said, that's been admitted to on record. So, and then they mercilessly stalked and harassed that coroner for over a year until she finally changed it to accidental death as the official cause of death, taking any liability away from the church, from the coroner's office death report. And that was the thing that killed the police investigation, because the whole thing hinged on, was her death negligent or was it accidental? And once the coroner gave up, said, okay, I concede, I give up. And that was the last thing she did. I think she died like a year later or something, totally broken person. The church was just ruthlessly following her, stalking her, professionally destroying her, character assassination. I mean, anything you can imagine they were doing toward her. So that was how they turned that tide and that's how basically David Miscavige and the church got away with murdering somebody. That's all record. That's all public record. Anybody can go look that up. The facts of the matter are completely undeniable. But the law enforcement didn't have the evidence that they needed to be able to move forward, and so that happened, and that was not that was really, really bad. That brought a whole nother PR storm down on Scientology and on Miscavige. It did not affect the Scientologists' view of David Miscavige. We talked about bite model and environmental and information control. Scientologists I did not know anything about Lisa McPherson, except that she that there had been an accidental death at Flag. That's all I knew. The specifics of it were completely covered up. No one in Scientology, outside a very, very small number of people who were at Flag, actually knew what went down. And those who did know and were at all a threat were either kicked out or were sent off to Australia or some shit. Like they were just gotten rid of.
And that's and that is just like classic cult behavior. And
yep.
Frankly, if you look at the history of modern Mormonism, anytime, number one, anytime any member starts talking publicly, especially with the media or getting attractions about any problems with the church was very quick to shame them, demean them, excommunicate them, cut them off. That's how these, that's how cults work, frankly. That's how unhealthy organizations work. And it's just stunning how much members of cults live in a bubble where their brains are just not aware of things that the general public's aware of.
That's right.
Yeah. That there can be, headlines in the New York Times or in the Wall Street Journal or in the London, whatever, Good Morning America, pick your news source, where they're talking about serious problems with the Mormon church. And 99% of the active faithful membership of the United States will never know anything about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it can't be, this point can't be reinforced strongly enough, because it is so vital to understand this, because the most common refrain, the fastest, the thing you hear more often from people who were never Scientologists, never Mormons, they listen to us or they read books or whatever, and they get the story on what's actually going down with these groups, and they go, my God, how could anybody fall for this? How could anybody do this? How could anybody stay with this? And they don't seem to grok that the people who are in don't know any of what you know. I have to reiterate this time and time again. It's like, just listening to what we have said in the last couple hours, you know more about David Miscavige and Scientology than every single Scientologist on this planet.
and if you add the 3 hours with L. Ron Hubbard, you're a relative Scientology scholar.
Oh my God, I'm telling you, this is years of education and experience talking, right? It took me years to get all this stuff. And, the 27 years that I was in, I did not know this stuff. Everything I thought I knew. See, the church has its own history, it tells you. There's its own bibliography or biography of Hubbard, of Miscavige, of how all these events went down. They have spun all of this into something that makes it look like all these events were either preordained, they were done on purpose for some purpose that is positive to Scientology or Hubbard or Miscavige. It's always spun. And so the Scientologists have a view of these. If they have any acknowledgement or knowledge of the events at all, then their spin on it is a completely different take from what the actual objective facts of the matter are.
Yeah.
So they don't know what you know. They don't think the way you think. And so that's why they can stay in these groups and just, it's all great. What's the problem? Everything's fine.
Yeah.
And I try to get this point across. I have to stress it, which is why I'm, talking like this, but it's really hard to get people to understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those parallels are just stunning.
Yeah. Aren't they? Aren't they amazing?
Yeah.
Okay, so that whole Lisa McPherson thing happens, but as a result of that, something interesting happens, which is that, and this is my own take, this is my own subjective take on this. It's not, like this is formally written down somewhere or something, but I noticed that at this point, when Lisa McPherson went down, I was now a Sea Org member. I was in the Sea Org, and I was overseeing the delivery of Dianetics and Scientology across the entire Western United States. Lisa McPherson thing was Eastern United States, so I didn't have any privy. I wasn't privy or knowledgeable about any of the stuff that went down on Lisa McPherson at all when I was in. I had no knowledge of it. But I was overseeing the delivery of Dianetics and Scientology in the Western United States, and it was noticeable that from this point forward, there wasn't really a whole lot of stress being put anymore on auditing, on the counseling. Now, that's the big moneymaker for Scientology in terms of high-cost services. So it wasn't like they just neglected it altogether. There was never an order to stop selling auditing or don't put any attention on it or stop delivering it. There was never anything like that. But the emphasis from the top, which is where we got all of our orders from, right? Miscavige would issue orders and directions, and this would filter down through the various levels and echelons of Scientology. There's a whole management structure in place. We never listened to, the only time you heard David Miscavige talk directly was at the events. It wasn't like he'd come in the room and give you orders. He was many echelons above where I was at. So his orders would filter down, though, and the emphasis was always on the donations, the IAS donations. Make money, just straight money. And that's where all the emphasis was put. So you didn't have to say or order, stop selling auditing. You just stop emphasizing it. And that was a distinct change, at least from my point of view, in the emphasis of Scientology from the point of Lisa McPherson on. I think David Miscavige looked at that whole incident as a warning that Scientology counseling could have dangerous repercussions on somebody's mental state. And I don't think he ever wanted to be in a position where he was going to be potentially, indicted for murder or negligent homicide or whatever the charges would have been. So he started de-emphasizing the auditing side of Scientology and started emphasizing buildings and donations and war chest and just giving us money because we're saving the world instead of give us money for services, you see. And he then did a whole republication and repackaging of all of the materials of Dianetics and Scientology. And he released a bunch of new lectures that had never seen the light of day from Hubbard before, from the 1950s. And he made a big production through the early 2000s and into the late 2000s of everybody needs to read all these books and listen to all these lectures, and that's where the emphasis needs to be. And so that's where Scientologists started putting their attention, is on those things and on getting big. He started a whole new program in the early 2000s to purchase and renovate big church buildings to replace out every single city office, city level church all over the planet. And there were about 130 to 140 something churches. So this was going to be a years and years long project that he launched to get all these purchased, to get new buildings purchased and then renovate them. And the fundraising that was getting done for this, it wasn't going to be paid by Scientology International. It was going to be paid for by the parishioners of each of the different areas. So they were going to fundraise. And this has been what Scientology has been doing for the last 19, certainly for the last 15 years, at least, right? Is just straight fundraising for these buildings and renovating them. And that's been the big push.
How does that benefit David Miscavige and the
real estate?
Let's just say the financial portfolio. Valuation. What's that?
Right. It's real estate holdings.
Yeah.
It's property valuation, right? The real estate value of Scientology going up and up and up, which gives it more buying power. It also services tax exemption, because you have to take, as a nonprofit, charity, or religious organization, you have to show that the money you're receiving is being reinvested back into the organization. You can't just sit on it. They don't let you do that. You gotta do certain things. There's certain hoops you have to jump through. Accumulating wealth is not the purpose of a charitable religious organization. So if that's what you're doing, the IRS is going to look at you a little funny. So when they made their agreement in '93, they said there were certain projects they were working on that they were going to be spending a lot of money on. And they have fulfilled that part of the agreement, because the one thing David Miscavige is more like concerned about than anything else, except his own personal physical safety, of course, is keeping that tax exemption in place. If the Church of Scientology loses its tax exemption, it's going to be game over within a couple of years. So, because they just don't have the money to be able to keep the operation going the way that it's going if they don't have tax exemption. And there are other legal ramifications of that. If they lose tax exemption, then their religious status could be threatened. They could have to start paying minimum wage to people. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could roll out as a result of that. So it's very, very important that they hold on to their tax exemption. So David Miscavige will make absolutely sure that everything the church does is done in such a way that the IRS will be happy with them. He doesn't have a lot to worry about right now, though, because the IRS doesn't really care at all about Scientology.
You were about to swear again.
I know. It's funny that I control myself on that. But anyway, okay. So he's got to.
Can I just draw a parallel really quick?
Oh yeah, please.
So what I'm hearing is something that we're also seeing in modern Mormonism. The church famously, let's just say 5 or 10 years ago, made the announcement that it was going to invest, $1.5 to $3 billion in a commercial real estate mall. And what we've learned is that the Mormon church owns 2% of Florida. What we've seen is that the church buys or builds high-rise condominiums in Philadelphia and here in Salt Lake City, and they're building all these temples and remodeling them, but they're also building new ones, but they're also, as I understand, planning sort of real estate developments or, real estate enhancements, and doing a lot of speculation around the property that gets bought with the temple. And what you see happening is an organization moving from being doctrine-based, theology-based, to an organization that's largely sort of this massive corporation of real estate and financial holdings, where the church is just the way that you hook them and get the cash flow. But what it's really about is maintaining and growing assets. And that is your core, that is the core focus of your organization.
Let me ask you a question. When did that become exposed for the first time? When did that start? When did people start realizing that's what the Mormon Church was doing?
I mean, there were articles here and there on it, 20, 30 years ago, but it really is ramped up in the past 15 years and really ramped up when the church, announced it was building again. There was always this joke, like, what mall would Jesus build, right? Like,
right.
Jesus,
Exactly.
both Jesus and the Book of Mormon were anti-materialism. They were anti-consumerism. They were anti-world. And we're just like, why is the church named after Jesus Christ building a mall that has a Tiffany's or a Victoria's Secret? Or why is that how the church is spending taxpayer funds? And so again, it's been in the zeitgeist for 30 years, but it's ramped up in the past 10.
Well, I'm gonna point out something that I think you might find kind of funny in terms of these parallels. I thought when I was in Scientology that the Mormons were ripping us off, but it turns out we were ripping you guys off, and that was a big, huge billboard and ad campaign, which still goes to this day, which is the I Am a Scientologist.
No. We followed you. You had that first.
Are you sure?
Because I'm 100% sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've talked to people who were part of the I'm a Mormon media campaign.
Yeah.
And I know the dates that first came out, and I was able to find Scientology YouTube videos from the previous year.
Okay.
So whatever PR agency worked with you guys, either some other PR agency ripped them off, or they just came right over to us.
Interesting. Okay. Because my research came up the other direction, but I'll take your word for it because I think
I could be wrong. I'm telling you my research. We'll have our listeners solve this debate. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just telling you what I investigated.
I thought when I was in the church, I remember when that campaign of ours started, and then after it started, I was out and about in Minnesota or somewhere one day, and then I saw the I'm a Mormon billboard, and I went, those fuckers, they just ripped off our campaign, right? But that was just my own experience with it.
So what year did your campaign start?
I don't even remember at this point. 2000... It would have had to have been after 2009 or 10.
Okay, so I know ours starts around mid 2011. So I recall I was able to find stuff from Scientologists in 2010. I could be wrong.
And you might be right on that. Might work both ways. Regardless of that, I thought that was interesting. But I was going to make the point that David Miscavige is not a stupid person.
Yeah.
He is not a college educated person, but that's not required to be a smart person or be a canny person. And the guy is vicious. He is vindictive. He is a number of character traits that are not pleasant or fun. And he has physically assaulted people and all of that. But the guy has also held his position for the number of years that he's held it through a whole lot of smarts. He's had to come up with all kinds of marketing ideas and repackaging things and real estate stuff and figuring out the legal stuff and all the various things that he has to deal with. And that's a lot. And I can't help but wonder, as soon as you said all that stuff about the Mormons investing in real estate and stuff, what investments we don't know about that the Church of Scientology might be engaging in, because we know about these ideal organization buildings that they're buying, and we know that this is a real estate thing, and we're absolutely positive that this is being done to service the tax exemption of keeping the funds being reinvested into the church. But we also know that this has real estate valuation that increases the assets of the church. And we know for sure, I know this for a fact, that the church has other investments. But what those investments are is probably one of the most closely guarded secrets within the church that only a very, very tiny number of people know anything about.
Same with us.
I wasn't ever supposed to find out about it. A guy just kind of dropped it on me as a comment one day, and I thought, that's interesting, and I don't think he was supposed to say anything about it.
Yeah, same with us. We, estimates are that the Mormon Church has somewhere close to $500 billion in assets, or $500 billion in assets.
Right.
But nobody knows the real number, because the way that it's all organized and all the different holding companies, it's intentionally structured so that no one can know the full picture.
Exactly. And that's the same thing with Scientology, as I went over with that whole 80s restructuring. There's no reason to believe that was the end of the line on all of that, or that there aren't many, many, many other things that the Church of Scientology could have its little fingers in, Yeah.
Hey, really quick, I was able to find an I'm a Scientologist YouTube video dated September 23rd, 2009.
There we go.
It's called I'm a Scientologist, Aaron Skateboarder.
Right.
And,
it's funny to me that the Mormons ripped us off on that, actually, because I had a hard time believing that we didn't rip you guys off, but I'm okay with that.
What's clear, what's got to be, is that they're management consultants or accountants or lawyers that know how to assist churches because the parallels are just unbelievably uncanny, right? And
Miscavige certainly has a little host of attorneys, tax attorneys, legal advisors, and stuff. We have noted that they have hired PR firms in the past, but the PR firms, at least the ones that we know about, okay, and clearly there might be other things that have happened that we don't know anything about, but the ones that we do know about, Miscavige rejected their advice and went off on their, and the church went off on their own tangents on stuff, because the PR, I know a huge PR firm was hired in the 90s when the Time magazine article came out and a bunch of other stuff happened, and they hadn't quite got their tax exemption yet and stuff. And then even after the tax exemption, they were still getting some bad publicity. And Miscavige hired a big PR firm, and they said, look, you guys got to change your public image, man. You got to stop this whole shunning and disconnection stuff and the stalking and harassment you do of people. That stuff's got to end. You got to stop that. And Miscavige was like, yeah, no, we don't. You're fired. that was the end of that, and they're not going to change those core principles, So it was interesting. I know about that. I don't know about anything else as far as them hiring big name firms and stuff. But I do know that for a number of years, Scientology has had the gift of some extremely talented people who worked on their PR and marketing lines. And Miscavige got rid of them only in the 2000s. And they were really blessed to have some of those people. And that, like I mentioned earlier, that Dianetics campaign was the fruit of a Sea Org member's brain. I mean, that's where that whole thing came from. That wasn't an outside firm getting hired. They have had some very talented people working within the church, and they've taken advantage of those people, of course, and then gotten rid of them when they've ceased being useful. So who they have up there now, Miscavige has an ability to pull new people up to his level. And when they get up to his level in the rarefied air of the international base, they don't know about all the stuff, all the crap that's gone before. Because when people get disappeared or get disciplined or sent off to Australia, their names get stricken from the rolls. They don't talk about those people anymore. And so there's no history.
That's the whole subversive person thing, which is probably equivalent to our excommunication or the Jehovah's Witnesses shunning, right?
That's right. And getting declared suppressive is the end of the line for the person. So
suppressive, it's not subversive, it's suppressive.
It's suppressive, yes.
A suppressive person.
That's right.
SP.
Yeah, SP right here. Yeah. So that's how that works, and you don't talk about those people anymore, and you sure as hell would never mention them to Miscavige. So you just learn right away when you get moved up to and promoted to this new level that you're at, that you've got lines to toe, and you better keep your mouth shut and just get to work. And that's how he gets new talent And then he, destroys them within a year or 2 or 3, and then they're relegated off somewhere else. And then he pulls up more people, and as long as they remain ignorant of what's actually going on at the upper levels, they come up all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and thinking this is going to be the most exciting thing ever, and they're going to work for David Miscavige. Oh, my God, that's amazing. And then within a week, they find out, oh, my God, I'm in hell. And that's their life. And when you're a Sea Org member, that is your life. It's not just your job. Sea Org members do not work 9 to 5 hours. They are 24/7. So that's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
So Lisa McPherson, the reorganization of the organizations and real estate is basically where the church is at now. And Miscavige has basically worked out a system where about every 10 to 15 years, he repackages the entire body of materials that they have released and says, we repackaged it and we made all these changes in it because this is what L. Ron Hubbard actually wanted. And the people who didn't do this screwed up all of his instructions, and I came in and sorted it all out, and I figured it out, and here's the new repackaged, wonderful bridge to total freedom, and now there are no stops, and you can go from 0 to hero in very short order, and just give us $100,000 and you'll be set, right? And this is kind of how Miscavige has kept the Scientology side of this whole thing going all of this time. And he did it in 1998 when they did their first repackaging. They did it again in 1996. They did it again in 2004. And then they did it again in 2012. So yeah, 8 to 10, years or so between these things. And that's just how he keeps it going internally. And somehow it's continued to roll forward. They have lost more people than they have gained over this time. It is a shrinking situation. But as long as they have big donors, and they do have millionaires and even, higher people get involved in Scientology, and those people throw money at it like crazy. And they get great big trophies in return and lots of photo ops with David Miscavige and, VIP treatment when they go to Clearwater. And so they're happy with their Scientology, and that's all they want to know about it. And so that's all they do that's as far as they go into it. They don't watch South Park. They don't watch Going Clear. They don't look at Leah's show because they know that that's all just a bunch of lies on the internet, quote unquote. And they're happy with their Scientology. So that's what they do. And somehow they keeps the con going that way. And that is modern Scientology now.
Yeah, a couple other things that just come to mind. I am thinking about there is a culture of VIP elite Mormonism that starts with the apostles and then the general authorities and all the auxiliary leaders of the church, and then their friends and family. And there are all sorts of people that make money off of, the various ways that the church spends or invests money. And so there's this, you wonder how it doesn't unravel, but there's this huge centralized core culture of people who are either controlling the church or who work for organizations that depend on the church or that fund the church or that, the church gives favors to. And then there's this whole culture of we'll build a temple in Italy so that rich, wealthy Mormons can go visit Italy and have this beautiful experience. Or, we talked to you last time about the second endowment culture, where if you're wealthy enough and prestigious enough and faithful enough, the church will give you access to this special temple ceremony that no one else gets.
Yeah.
And of course, it's tied to how much money you've paid and how much power and influence. And of course, Utah's becoming extremely prosperous business-wise. All these software companies are springing up. You have all these multi-level marketing firms that are massive. And what you see is that these, the church helps these corporations succeed, and then these corporations pay big tithings back to the church. And even if the leaders sometimes themselves, the CEOs of these software companies or, the MLMs, whatever they do in private is kind of their business. But there's this real symbiotic relationship of benefiting from the church, but then loyalty to the church, that creates this massive cash machine,
Oh, huge. And paralleled completely in Scientology by an organization called the World Institute of Scientology Enterprises, or WISE. And that's a division of the Church of Scientology. It's formally part of their structure, but it is a secular arm, so to speak, in that they have secularized Hubbard's administrative and management policies. And they have put them into binders and books. And they say, this is how you should run your company. Just like L. Ron Hubbard says we should be running our churches, that's how you should be running your company, with statistics and 3-basket systems on every people's desks, and an ethics system, and a this and a that and another thing. And of course, this is so thrivingly successful that Scientology churches are booming everywhere. So of course, this is the model to use. Not, but Scientology business people and folks who get involved in Scientology who want to get rich think this is the way to do it. And they pay the church for the right to use this materials, and they network. There's all kinds of networking going on between business people within the Scientology world. Lots of tit for tat, and a lot of people getting rich on the backs of employees that they abuse and treat very badly and pay very badly. A lot of commission system based pay systems and stuff like that. So they're really, really, they kind of set up these businesses that look just like Scientology organizations, except they're not, except they're for-profit companies. And the guys at the very, very top are getting enriched, and everybody else is just struggling to get by. All oddly similarly, run on an MLM type basis of, well, the harder you work, the more money you'll make. Right. This is how Scientology staff members are also conned, it's all on you how much money the church makes, and their pay on a week-to-week basis at the churches is based on a small percentage of the overall profit that the organization makes that week. So if the organization doesn't make any money that week or doesn't make enough, then they don't get paid. And well, it's on you. You didn't work hard enough. And that's kind of how that whole operation is continuing to go on. So they have a very low overhead of having to pay their employees,
right,
within the church. And even the Sea Org members can only make a max of 50 or let's say $100 a week. So
right.
the church does not have to pay out that much for all this labor that it's getting. And it spreads this idea out into the business world as though this is a really great idea, and this is the foundation on which you should build a successful business. And it propagates itself that way. And the guys at the top of these businesses who are raking in the bucks think it's great. And they, of course, give money back to the church as a result of that. And that whole thing is a big part of what keeps Scientology going too.
Yeah, we'll talk about this when we get to the part of your life as an activist, after we talk about your life as a Scientologist. But
yes.
How do you fight a organization worth hundreds of billions of dollars?
Yeah, it's tough,
How do you stand against that?
Yeah, I mean, legally, it's almost impossible. Taking Scientology on legally is a difficult quest, to be sure. I find public awareness campaigns and exposure of abusive behavior to be the best routes, because those are things anybody can get on board with.
Really quickly, one big parallel also that we haven't quite touched on a bit is the idea of whitewashing its history. So, when South Park came out with its Scientology episode, whenever it was about Trapped in the Closet with Tom Cruise or whatever, it revealed to the public, in my awareness for the first time, maybe broadly, this whole stuff that we talked about last episode about Xenu and the Thetans and the volcanoes and the aliens and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it's clear that at some point in, I guess, the late 60s, 70s, that stuff all crept into core Scientology teachings. But A, most members weren't aware of that. And B, when it came out, it seems like there was this push to kind of either hide it or whitewash it or deny it.
Mm-hmm.
And Mormonism has been going through that over the past 10 years, where we're finding all this stuff out about Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham. seedy church history that the church either whitewashed or denied or tried to hide or tried to punish people who talked about it. Can you talk about that for a bit?
Absolutely. The internet has been called Scientology's Vietnam, because the thing that busts the bite model and busts that up and makes it invalid or ineffective is when you have a free flow of information and access to that information, and people are able to see, alternate views or ideas about how things have been in the past and how things are now. And this hit Scientology harder than lots of other groups because they really relied on the lack of accessibility to, historical information. The internet now makes it a couple clicks away, and you can see L. Ron Hubbard's war records. You can see his college transcripts. You can see all of this stuff right there. You try to find this stuff in 1970, it's going to take you weeks to get hold of this information. So that's been sort of the game changer. Excuse me. And what that did is it allowed us to, excuse me, sorry. It allowed us to fact check what we had been taught. L. Ron Hubbard was a pretty crafty guy, and he was pretty ballsy about rewriting his own history. And the church, of course, towed the line with that, to the point that they even hired a biographer who, the first biographer they hired was not a Scientologist. His name was Omar Garrison in the 80s. And that was a dog's breakfast, because he was a real writer and a real researcher. And he went, "You want me to write what?" So then they hired a Scientologist to do it. And his name is Danny Sherman. And this guy has been writing the L. Ron Hubbard biography since like the mid-80s or mid-90s or something. And it's still not done because, of course, it can't be done because everybody knows what the actual biography of L. Ron Hubbard is in the real world. So all the historical rewriting that L. Ron Hubbard did, and he would do it through his lectures and through his writings. He would say, "I was here, I did this here, I did this here." And if you put it all together, you come up with this picture that's an impossible picture. It can't be that he was doing all these things at all these times. But then you get the actual records, somehow, even despite that, you still make it make sense as a Scientologist. You go, well, maybe he was mistaken about this. It could have happened here and, whatever. And it doesn't really matter anyway. And Hubbard's such a great guy and genius and hero. And who cares if he got a couple dates wrong or something? That's about as much critical thought as you put into it when you're a Scientologist, at least for me and my experience with that. And there are major efforts made by the church to reinforce Hubbard's narratives. They've published magazines with photographs and letters and journal entries and things that all support the narrative Hubbard laid out for his life and for the history of the church. The internet, destroys all that stuff, because then you see all of the other information you're not seeing. And it's kind of the same way you take apart conspiracy theories. If you only listen to the 9/11 truthers, you might think that they're really making a solid case. And then you do a little bit more research on the stuff they're not telling you, and you go, oh, no, nothing they're saying makes any sense at all. It's the same thing with Scientology. And there's been a lot of money and a lot of time put in by Scientologists to rewrite that history and make L. Ron Hubbard out to be this genius philosopher who, literally, they say from the age of 3, was trying to solve the problems of man. And took it upon his tiny little shoulders to save the world. This is the hagiography of it. So it's kind of interesting looking at how they do that and how all these cults end up having to do that.
And so what would the average Scientologist say if you went to them and said, "You guys believe in aliens and Thetans and Xenu and spaceships"?
Oh, see, now all of that's confidential, right? That's all hush hush. It is a well-kept secret in the world of Scientology. I did not ever hear, not once, in 27 years of being around Scientology, 25 working
and being in the Sea Org,
17 in the Sea Org,
right?
Not once did I hear the name Xenu. Not once. Much less the rest of the story.
Right.
I sold OT3 to people, and I did not know what was on it. That's how tightly kept the secrets are in Scientology. And the reason for that is because you are given, when you're told or hear L. Ron Hubbard talk about the OT3 material, he doesn't go into details about it. All he says is, to the general Scientology public, he says, a great catastrophe occurred on this planet and in this sector of the universe 75 million years ago, and it has been a desert and a wasteland ever since. And I cannot tell you what happened, because if you are not ready for this material, if you get exposed to it before you're ready, this knowledge will create a mental problem for you that will get you spun in, and you will get pneumonia and you will die within 2 to 3 days. And I'm not going to let that happen to you guys, so I'm not going to tell you all about this, and you can't know about it until you're ready for it. And it is on that basis that every Scientologist keeps their mouth shut. Once they find out about Xenu, of course, they're already sworn to secrecy. They've already signed bonds saying that they're going to pay $10,000 every single time they slip any secret about it. These bonds are completely non-enforceable. Nobody's ever paid a dime for any of this, but this is what you sign. So you believe that you are under this obligation, this financial penalty, if you reveal the secrets. And you also are under the impression from the mind control that you'll kill people if you tell them about this stuff.
Yeah, what is that belief? I mean, you've explained it, but just I'm not getting the you'll kill people.
Yeah, it'll kill you. Well, it's like this. This whole incident that happened 75 million years ago with Xenu was meant to be kept a secret. You weren't supposed to remember any of that shit that went down, right? This all happened millions of years ago to you as a spiritual being. Right? So spiritually, you got really, really screwed over a long time ago. It is the most traumatic experience you will ever remember. And you can't remember it for that reason. Locks were put on it. It was like, in hypnosis, you're told you can't remember a thing. It's like that on steroids times a million. That's what OT3 is. So you cannot remember it. You'll never imagine it. It'll never come up in your memory banks, right? It's just this black area. It's this void of knowledge and experience that you just don't have access to. But you still are subject to all the consequences of it. So you're stuck here on Earth. You're stuck in a meat body. This is not you. This is not you at all. This is just something you're carrying around and occupying and living a life with. But it really doesn't have any more significance than a Barbie doll does. And you're stuck here, you're trapped here, and you don't even know why. You have no memory or recall of it. And you will never be able to remember it. And the trap is, and it was all done purposefully to trap you here so that you would be stuck here and that you wouldn't have any other choice. That's the reasoning behind why that whole thing is so dark and dangerous, and why if you expose yourself to it before you're ready for it, you will have, you'll die, because that's how the trap was set up to keep it a secret. Is anybody who comes anywhere close to finding out the truth of the matter, well, their body dies. And when your body dies, you forget everything.
And Mormon historians will know the parallels better than me, but there's certainly instances of Joseph, to justify his polygamy, saying that God sent an angel to me with a flaming sword, that if I didn't, sleep with other men's wives, that an angel would kill me. Or, right. Or I have these golden plates, but if anybody looks upon them with their own eyes, they'll certainly be, I don't know the historical quotes. One of our listeners, Allie, writes, "Seeing the plates will kill you." It's one. I'm not surprised that we have those type of parallels as well, where it goes to the point of even threatening superstitious death. And of course, with Mormonism, we've got these death oaths where in the temple you used to like slit your throat or,
right,
do the motion of cutting out your own heart or disemboweling yourself as threats of what will happen if you ever reveal the secrets in the top secret Mormon temple ceremonies. That's a thing.
Yeah. And in Scientology, basically the idea is there are mechanisms pre-installed in your mind that will cause these horrible things to happen to you if the trap is sprung. If you come across that and you're not ready, and it's not dissimilar to, I don't know, what do they say in Christianity, that if you hear the voice of God, that nobody can actually hear God because the power of God's voice would destroy you in a microsecond or something, So it's this kind of idea of like some all-powerful force that exists outside you that, knowledge is dangerous and ignorance is bliss. And
but it does surprise me that in the past 5-10 years, Scientologists in modern times would still potentially be bound by that sort of superstition, but then it doesn't, because you just have to look at, the way some people, all the different superstitious kind of folk magic kind of stuff that still has a hold on people in 2019.
That's right.
I guess it doesn't surprise me at all. That's the power of religion, right?
Exactly. And it should be noted that not everybody who ever did OT3 is still a Scientologist. A lot of people who were exposed to that information and went through it and believed it for a long time. Well, you come up to the present, or you come up to when South Park came out, and they see that people aren't dying. There's no problem at all. And that definitely did set off some cognitive dissonance for some people, and they left the church as a result of that kind of doubts and things entering into it, So back in the day, before there was the internet, before there was, such broad access to even television. I mean, look at what television was like through the 60s and 70s. It was a couple channels.
3 channels,
Hubbard never imagined. He never envisioned anything like the internet. Yeah. So he didn't write any policies or come up with anything to counter that, because he had no clue that something like that was going to hit.
So are you saying
after he died?
Are you saying that the internet has kind of slapped? I was going to swear, has kind of slapped Scientology in the modern era the way that it has Mormonism?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. It's been, like I said, it's been characterized as Scientology's Vietnam. They're powerless against the internet and the knowledge that it brings.
Okay, so you're seeing modern day disaffections from Scientology because of the internet.
Absolutely. That's how I got out.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll be getting to that next.
If it wasn't, exactly. So,
and that's the way the Going Clear documentary left it. That oddly, Scientology is shrinking in membership, which the Mormon Church is too. If we didn't have the Africa baptisms, and I served a mission in Guatemala in the 80s, anyone from the United States could baptize someone who's impoverished enough in the third world. So if it weren't for the Philippines, Latin America, and Africa baptisms that offset all the people going inactive in the Mormon Church or resigning or disaffecting or leaving, the church would be shrinking. And of course, the birth rate is helpful as well within Mormonism, because we've always had large families. But really, the church is at pretty much 0% growth, less than 1% growth, and it's facing decline. But oddly, and this is most disturbingly, the assets have swelled, and all these religious protections have swelled to the point where the church doesn't even really need the tithing of its members. All it needs to do is keep getting 10 or 15 or 20% returns on its assets and its investments, and it's going to be growing astronomically in wealth with all these religious and tax exceptions. And it doesn't matter if all the chapels are closing or empty in the case of Scientology. It doesn't matter if the members are leaving, because this corporate entity is now to the point where it doesn't even need members or member donations to be able to grow in money and power, right?
That is exactly the case with Scientology as well. Exactly. And I think, and I highly doubt that it's only Scientology and Mormonism. I'll bet you a bunch of these guys who have long range ideas of being around for, and having their creature comforts and having their organization keep going, are going to glom on to this model and you're going to see that the real estate portfolios and other investment portfolios of these groups. And unfortunately, actually, the problem is that we don't have free access to their real estate and investment portfolios because they don't have to give up any of this information. I'm surprised you know as much about the Mormons as you do. I guess they're a bit more transparent than Scientology.
Well, just over the past 5 or 10, 15 years, we've just had this really intense online community of blogs and then podcasts and then Facebook groups and now Reddit groups, and then even investigative sort of activists, kind of like a WikiLeaks, Mormon Leaks kind of thing, where we've just had this culture of really scrutinizing, talking about, sharing, and promoting, bringing light on the problems to Mormonism, and then supporting people through their faith transition. And then, as people leave or lose their loyalty, leaking and sharing information or testifying about their experiences. And it's the Mormon Stories has been around for 14 years. We've got like 1,200 hours of podcast episodes now. And
Wow.
The whole thing has been to help shine a spotlight on the church and then to help people transition away if they're not happy with it. And secondarily, what that's done is, that and a lot of other things have helped continually force the church through public shaming, through public scrutiny, through exposure and testifying and PR. It's forced the church to change. And right now we've got a prophet, leader of our church, even though he's 92, 95, I don't know how old this guy is, but every single month there's a major change that he's making in the church, because I think the church is realizing that they don't, it's one thing to just stay wealthy and powerful, but if you're losing all your members, that kind of becomes embarrassing. So we're seeing it's almost like a relative renaissance of Mormonism as the leaders are just desperately scrambling. They're shortening the church to 2 hours from 3. They're making it so, people don't get excluded from weddings if they're not the right level of activity. They're loosening everything they can possibly loosen, being more friendly to LGBT people, more friendly to women. And of course, they're backsliding too. But yeah, we're just seeing the church frantically doing whatever it can to not become irrelevant in the public consciousness.
Well, I think there are lessons there for us in the Scientology activism world then, because maybe this is more of a marathon than a sprint. And that is something that some activists in my world have had issues with, because we've wanted immediate results or fairly rapid results. And with groups like this, they are, maybe it's viewed more as a ship, and you got to turn that thing, and it takes a lot of momentum and a lot of work to take a cruise liner and turn it in a different direction, and that's kind of what we're doing with these groups through our exposure and of their abuses and stuff. And I think you'd probably agree with me that we're not trying to destroy the church. We're trying to get them to stop being abusive.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. We're not trying to destroy the church. We're just trying to reduce the pain and increase the civility and then support people, give people awareness so they know what they're a part of.
Right.
So that they're not a member of something they really don't know about. And then allow people to make conscious decisions with full consent. And if they have all the information, know about the harms and risks, and then maintain their affiliation, heaven bless them, right?
Exactly.
LHR bless them.
If somebody is operating in Scientology with fully informed consent, and they're down for paying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for things that are really in the end not going to do them any good, fine with me. I got nothing to say about that. That's not in my realm. It's when people are being physically abused, emotionally and psychologically manipulated, lied to and abused those are my issues, and that's what we need to see stop. And so I guess we're both making our progress in our ways.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. I'm guessing we probably will need to postpone for another day our third segment, which is your story. Is that right?
Yeah, it's going to be its own thing, I think.
Okay. Well, Chris, this has been another brilliant episode. I think I heard you tell me that maybe this is the first time you've talked so extensively, in depth for such a straight period of time about all that you know. And I know there's a million things you could have mentioned that you didn't, but what a fascinating history. And I'm just not at all stunned that the parallels continued through David Miscavige's tenure up to the present. It's like these churches are running parallel courses. I hope you're not offended in me saying that I think Scientology has us beat in terms of sort of levels of cruelty and violence and illegalities. But
certainly in modern times, I will not debate that.
Yeah. And so I'm sorry for your people. I'm not necessarily proud of mine, but I guess I am very happy that you exist, that you're sharing what you know, and that we're shining a light and helping to clean things up the best that we can. So thanks for helping us see the parallels, because sometimes you understand your own tradition better when you see it through the lens of another tradition.
Big time. And right back at you, man. I really appreciate everything you are doing. You're doing really championship work.
All right, Chris Shelton, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks to everyone who supports. Please support Chris. Tell us how people can buy your books. Check out your YouTube page. Check out your website.
Right. Okay, mncriticalthinking.com is my blog. YouTube, look up Chris Shelton. You will find me right away. And you can join me on Patreon if you enjoy my content and think it is entertaining, informative, and educational, which a lot of people seem to think it is. So that's cool. And of course, you can buy my book, Scientology, A to Xenu, An Insider's Guide to What Scientology is Really All About, on Amazon, audio, ebook, or hardcover. And that's just a good critical analysis of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, how the tax exemption, all of it. It's all in there. So check it out.
All right, Chris Shelton, we'll see you back soon on Mormon Stories Podcast. You're great. And all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for everyone who keeps us alive. Please support us at mormonstories.org. There's no way to fight $1 billion, hundreds of billions of dollar organization without support. So thanks to everyone who financially supports Open Mormon Stories Podcast, the Open Stories Foundation. For those of you who want to see us be able to do more, to support more people, to do more good, please become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org. $10 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are transparent in our finances. We have accountants that do our best to make sure everything is tight and above board. We have an independent board that supports us and runs this nonprofit. And we just thank you for your support. We need your support, and we ask you to support us if you can. You can also support us by sharing this podcast, by telling others, by promoting it, by giving us a positive review on iTunes or on Facebook, and by just staying in touch with us, giving us your feedback and thoughts, helping us come up with new ideas, and helping us do great things. And I also just want to do a final plug for the Thrive Day, November 17, 2019. We're going to have a full day dedicated to supporting people who have left Mormonism, but it's all positive, it's all uplifting, and it's all about healing and growth, because that's what we want to be focused on. So please go to thrivebeyondmormonism.com, register for this event. It's $15 a day. We're going to lose thousands of dollars on this event. Nobody's getting paid, but we are that committed to healing and growth in Mormonism. And maybe we'll be partnering with Chris and others to see how we can do more good on a more broad scale. How does that sound, Chris?
Absolutely. I'm down.
All right, man. All right. We'll have you back soon, Chris. We want to hear your story.